Good Monday. This is Jay Brew, co-chairman of Seafried and Brew. What I wanted to show you today is our all-time worst-selling book here at Seafried and Brew. It's called The Art of Tax Efficiency. We've talked about this before in terms of banks should really strive to be tax efficient. That cannot be looked at as tax avoidance. But it starts with a strategic plan. In the strategic plan, every director should sit there and say, we want to be tax efficient. Because on an overall basis, community banks across the nation have an average tax rate of around 30.8%. To be truly tax efficient, one should be closer to, say, 20%. And that takes some work to get there, especially if you're up in the higher tax rates. But if the strategy is put into place, then one can sit there and figure out exactly how to get to the point of tax efficiency with a proper action plan. Because think of this, let's just say that you're at 30.8% and could get down to 20%. Figure that out in terms of the effect to your overall net income. At a time when we expect to see margins start to shrink with these low interest rates, how can we be in a position to affect an overall tax efficiency action plan? And my feeling, which you've heard me say before, I think it makes sense based upon where the municipal market is today. When we look at this, on an overall basis, is that tax-exempt bank qualified securities versus the 10-year are at incredibly high spreads. And we look at that historical nature because going back to, you can see at the beginning of this year that this was the Meredith Whitney effect, where people were just scared in terms of the overall effect of huge defaults that have not happened out there. So when we look at this and we look at this overall spread versus the 10-year, my feeling is that tax exempts are very cheap. The thing is that when we think of that, there's other things that we can also look at from the standpoint of an overall strategy, which I'll get into in a moment. But when we think about tax-exempt securities, especially where other securities are, even where loans are, is that you're looking at taxable equivalents that are almost higher than where mortgages are, where commercial loans are. And when we think of it, wouldn't it be great to get yields in that 5 to 6% range, which are available in the bank qualified market right now? So when we look at this and we say historically, well, you go back to this time period and compare these spreads compared to a more normalized time period. One could argue that where overall tax-exempt rates are from here to here is that even if interest rates started to go up in terms of the 10-year Treasury, I would argue that if you go back to 2006 when rates were high, look at where tax exempts are. My feeling is that the tax exempt market may not trade off as much as what other markets might trade off if interest rates go up in here, just based upon coming back to more historical type spreads. When we look at it, if you, from an asset liability standpoint, is that you want to look at the market volatility on the tax exempts you want to purchase. Tax exempts in the 20-year area have volatility going negative 17% in an up 300 basis point environment, which is very similar to, say, a 30-year mortgage in here. So when we look at that volatility, how does that overall affect our asset liability position? You should go in and model it. Can you put on X amount of these kind of tax exempts, even with this market volatility, which I don't think is going to be as significant as what's showing in here, that Can you put a certain amount of bank qualified tax exempts into your portfolio? The credit issue, of course, is taken care of when you look at the S&B Municipal Bond Ratings, because we can use this for both pre-purchase analysis before you purchase the securities, that we have an independent rating system different than the U.S. agencies. We look at it more or less how you as a community banker would look at a loan. We look at the financials and their financial strength and weaknesses. So from a pre-purchase as well as a post-purchase analysis, you can be in a position that you don't have to rely on the rating agencies, which is where the regulators are right now. They want to see independent review being done of the municipal portfolio, and we provide this at Seafried and Brew with our municipal bond ratings. And when we look at that from that overall credit standpoint, then we can put our strategy into place in terms of looking at a couple of different things to reach tax efficiency. One, as we were just talking about, were the tax-exempt securities, the tax-exempt bank-qualified bonds, but you also want to be in communication with your local communities because they most likely have financing needs. And they also have deposits too. So that if you put together a tight-knit sales program going into these municipalities, you'll find that maybe they don't have to go out into the markets. Maybe with the size issues that they can bring, that you can go in and take the entire issue yourselves, or you may be able to participate it out with some other community banks. So when we look at that, is that banks are able to get down to that level of tax efficiency. And if you're not at that level of tax efficiency, then put in that action plan to get there. Have a great Thanksgiving. This is Jay Brew, co-chairman of Seafried and Brew.